Hello there gorgeous people, this is Chris from TechSpert and I'm here with a fresh new OnePlus 6T and we're going to do a side-by-side with the Huawei Mate 20 Pro. They share quite a lot of smartphone DNA, both very strong contenders for best phone of 2018, so let's see which one might be best for you. And don't forget, for more on the latest and greatest mobile tech, to tap that subscribe button and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! So first up, stick them side by side and you'll see that both of these beastly blows are rather on the big side. OnePlus 6T is 6.41 inches, ever so slightly bigger than the 6.39 inch Mate 20 Pro. Either way, they're going to be a bit of a handful. Thankfully, they are quite comfortable to clutch thanks to the nice curvaceous design. Got a good bit of heft to them as well. Use these every day, you'll certainly be building your biceps. And I just love the way that the displays pretty much fill the whole front of both of these smartphones as well. You do get a bit of notch action up top. Of course, it's a bit more subtle here on the OnePlus 6T with their water drop notch, or dewdrop, or whatever term they're using for it. Whereas it's a bit more of a chunky affair here on the Huawei. If you dive on into the display settings, however, you do get an option of masking that notch from view on both of these smartphones. So if you're not a particular fan of that design, you can just get rid of it. Personally, I'm not really bothered. I think there's worse things out there to worry about. Flip them both around and you'll see you get quite different design as well, although they are both constructed from glass. Huawei Mate 20 Pro comes in a couple of different hues. This is the Twilight model. As you can see, it features that lovely gradient finish, lovely stuff. Very standout, just like the P20 Pro before it. The OnePlus design might not be quite as sexy, but you do have a couple of different variants. You can get it in this midnight black model, which is kind of a matte finish, which is quite nice because it does hide smudges and greasy prints, which unfortunately you do get on the Mate instead. But you can pick it up in a glossy finish as well, if that's your bag. And while there's no jazzy red model of the OnePlus 6T just yet, we're hoping that one will be announced soon, because frankly the OnePlus 6 in red was absolutely stunning. Both these smartphones have a bit of Type-C USB action down beneath, but you do not get a 3.5mm headphone jack. You'll have to use a dongle, but thankfully both Huawei and OnePlus do include one in the box. And the more observant of you may have noticed there is no fingerprint sensor mounted on the back or on the front. Of course, absolutely no space on the front, and that's because they both have a fingerprint sensor actually built into the display. It's a bit higher up here on the Mate, whereas it's down here at the bottom of the screen on the OnePlus, as you can see there. On both phones it's nice and responsive. I think it's slightly quicker on the Mate, unfortunately, than on the OnePlus, as you can see there. Pretty accurate though. Occasionally on the OnePlus we'll get a misread and we'll have to try again, which is quite rare on the Mate. But luckily both phones do offer a form of face recognition as well, using that front facing camera, and it's nice and nippy. So just tap the power button, as you can see, recognises your mug and you're straight into your desktops. Again, seems a little bit more reliable on the Mate rather than the OnePlus. The Mate, you can use it even when you're wearing sunglasses, absolutely no problem, whereas the OnePlus seems to struggle with sunglasses. But both are pretty good in low light, thankfully. They do flash the screen to light up your mug. So it works even in the dark. Before we get off the subject of design as well, it's worth mentioning that they're both water resistant to a degree. The Huawei Mate 20 Pro is actually fully IP68 water and dust resistant, so you can get it submerged, give it a dunking in the sink, the bath, whatever you want, and it's absolutely fine. In case the OnePlus 6T, it doesn't have that IP certification, but you can take it out in a rainstorm, absolutely no worries. In terms of general ruggedness, the OnePlus 6T seems to be the victor. You get a nice bit of Gorilla Glass 6 on that front. It's definitely very resistant to scratches, and you do have a form of screen protector built in there as well, just slapped on top. You don't get that on the Mate 20 Pro, sadly, and then we have picked up a couple of little scratches on there as well. So what about those displays? Well, they are of course mighty, 6.41 inches, 6.39 inches, and they are both OLED panels as well. The Huawei Mate 20 Pro is actually a little bit sharper. It's a Quad HD Plus resolution compared with the Full HD Plus OnePlus 6T. That said, as you'll see there, the tiny text and everything's perfectly legible here on the OnePlus 6T. You'll still get nice crisp images. If you compare images side by side, you will notice a little bit of a finer detail here on the Huawei Mate 20 Pro, but definitely OnePlus 6T still very solid as well. Great for a bit of Netflix, YouTube, things like that. Video looks absolutely stunning. As you see, quite vivid colours on both these handsets as well, and you can actually fully customise the colour output regardless of your choice as well. All you need to do is just dive into the display settings. Then here on the OnePlus 6T, you can go into screen calibration, and then as you can see there, I've got it on adaptive mode at the moment, but you can stick it on sRGB if you want some nice accurate colour representation. And you can fully customise the colour output as well. Ditto here on the Mate 20 Pro. I've currently got it on the vivid mode just to give those colours a nice little boost, but you can stick it back on normal mode if you want a more natural colour reproduction. Both phones can also automatically adjust the colour temperature based on the ambient environment. It's natural tone here on the Huawei Mate 20 Pro, and you've got the reader mode here on the OnePlus 6T. And of course the usual night modes and other shenanigans as well. And you also get a bit of ambient display action as well. On the Huawei Mate 20 Pro you can have it on there full time, whereas in the case of the OnePlus you can have it so it wakes up when you tap the screen or when you raise it, but you can't have it on there full time. Now these features are actually added by the individual overlays on top of Android. You get Android Pie on both Huawei Mate 20 Pro and on the OnePlus 6T, but the OnePlus 6T also rocks the Oxygen OS, in this case version 9.0.3, and on the Huawei Mate 20 Pro you get the latest version of Emotion UI, EMUI version 9. And both Oxygen OS and EMUI add all kinds of great features. So for instance, gamers are well catered for on the OnePlus 6T by the gaming mode. Start up a game and you'll see you'll be able to block any notifications from disturbing you while you're playing. You can optimize the performance so all of the resources are dedicated to that game and so on. Both phones also add all kinds of gesture controls as well, so you can quickly flip to mute, all that kind of stuff. Quickly take a screenshot, answer your calls with a gesture, all kinds of great stuff. You do get better one-handed help on the Mate 20 Pro, however, so for instance if you're back in the main screen, all you need to do is swipe up towards the center of the display, and as you can see it just shrinks the entire view down, makes it much easier to manage with one hand. You can just about reach up to that notifications bar then. You can't shrink the entire view here on the OnePlus, but you can at least drag down the notifications bar from anywhere on the screen, which is quite handy. And there's a whole load of other stuff in there. It would take absolutely ages to go through all of the individual features, so I won't bother. Don't want to bore you all to death. One thing worth mentioning though is the fact that the system navigation can be fully customized on both of these handsets as well. So as you can see here, both the OnePlus and the Mate 20 Pro, you can have a proper dedicated navigation bar down beneath for home, back, and your recent apps. And both phones also allow you to completely remove that navigation bar and just use gestures instead. These operate in a similar sort of manner. Here on the OnePlus, just swipe up at the side of the screen in order to go back. In the case of the Mate 20 Pro, you just have to swipe the side of the screen instead. It's probably slightly more intuitive. If you want to go home, get rid of whatever app you're playing with, just swipe up from the bottom. If you swipe up and hold, you'll then bring up your apps tray so you can have a bit of a flick through and open whatever you like. Now on to the meaty subject of performance, and as you might expect, both of these smartphones are absolute powerhouses. The OnePlus 6T runs Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 chipset, same as the OnePlus 6 before it, and that's backed by the 6 or 8 gigs of RAM depending on which model you get. This is the 8 gig model. On the Huawei Mate 20 Pro, you get Huawei's own Kirin 980 chipset, and that's backed by 6 gigs of RAM. So as you'd expect, either case you just tap an app and it immediately loads up, no hanging about. Boom, just straight into it. Nice and nippy, just what you want. I have of course run a bit of Geekbench on both of these handsets. For any of you benchmark enthusiasts, as you can see the Mate 20 Pro quite clearly canes the OnePlus 6T in those benchmark tests. Of course, doesn't necessarily mean that the Mate 20 Pro is the better performer of the two, it's just to give a sort of a rough guideline. Personally, I don't 100% trust benchmark testing because they can be gamed, but of course on the Huawei Mate 20 Pro you do get a bit of GPU Turbo 2.0. And that just helps your games to keep a nice consistent frame rate, so the likes of PUBG Mobile for instance, and a few other games are supported as well, such as Vainglory, and just give you a nice smooth experience even on those top detail levels. But then you get exactly the same here on the OnePlus 6T as well, and as I say, of course you get that gaming mode to just block any notifications and also keep you running smoothly. As for battery life though, the Huawei Mate 20 Pro is definitely the superior device. It's got a larger battery, 4,200 milliamps, absolutely massive. That's compared with the OnePlus 6T's 3,700 milliamps, still very sizable indeed. But we'll find that with the Mate 20 Pro we easily get sort of a day and a half of life, even with pretty intensive use. OnePlus 6T so far isn't lasting quite that long, but you'll still easily get a full day of very intensive use out of a full charge, and hopefully that'll improve a little bit over time. We've only had it a couple of days so far, so sometimes the battery life just improves once you've been using it for a few days. You get dash charge support of course as standard here on the OnePlus 6T, gets you powered back up to full in no time at all, and that's matched on the Huawei Mate 20 Pro by Huawei's own Supercharge. 40-watt charging power, so again gets you filled up in no time. When it comes to wireless charging, the OnePlus 6T does not offer wireless charging unfortunately, despite that glass back, but you do get that here on the Mate 20 Pro. It's surprisingly nippy, and you also here on the Mate 20 Pro get the option of wireless reverse charging, which actually turns the Huawei Mate 20 Pro into a wireless charging pad, allows you to power up another device which supports wireless charging. Very cool. As for storage, it's 128 gigs of storage here on the Mate 20 Pro as standard, and it doesn't support micro SD memory cards, it supports Huawei's new Nano memory cards. proprietary tech. Not entirely sure that's a sound idea, but there you go. Here on the OnePlus 6T, you've got a choice of either 128 gigs or 256 gigs of storage. Sadly, there is no expansion available. So what about that camera tech? Well, you get a dual lens snapper here on the OnePlus 6T, a 16 megapixel primary lens backed by a 20 megapixel secondary lens. This allows you to get a nice depth of field, and they're both f1.7 apertures for decent low light performance, and they both rock a bit of optical image stabilization as well. Here on the Mate 20 Pro, it's actually a tri-lens setup, very flexible indeed. You get a 40 megapixel primary RGB lens, that's an f1.8 aperture. You also get a 20 megapixel ultra wide angle lens with f2.2 aperture, and last but not least, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens with an f2.4 aperture. And that telephoto lens is the only one with optical image stabilization built in. If we jump on into the camera apps, you'll see it's a very different experience in terms of the features and everything as well, although they do share some very funky features as well. So in your standard auto mode, you get some nice shots on both the OnePlus 6T and the Huawei Mate 20 Pro. You actually get Huawei's Master AI functionality here on the Mate 20 Pro. That's just a slightly more advanced form of scene recognition. You can actually boost colours to make them more vivid, but thankfully you do have full control of that as well, so you get standard colours or boost it up to more vivid hues. You also get full manual controls on demand as well. So as you can see there, you can switch up the likes of the ISO levels, the white balance to get a very precise kind of shot. You also get a form of portrait mode on both of these blowers, so you can shoot a nice crisp shot of your subject and just blur out the background for a neat little bokeh effect. Here on the Mate 20 Pro though, you do get a range of sort of stage light and style effects as well, which you can throw in, including the ability to add disco effects and all kinds of weird stuff. And both the OnePlus 6T and the Huawei Mate 20 Pro have a night mode as well that just takes a sort of a long exposure shot, which works remarkably well even when holding the phones by hand. In both cases, it really boosts the brightness of your night shots and makes them much nicer to look at. I'm going to be doing a full camera comparison between these two handsets. Definitely stay tuned for that for a side-by-side comparison. And of course, naturally, you can shoot video on both these handsets as well. They do go up to 4K Ultra HD resolution. However, while the Mate 20 Pro shoots just at 30 frames per second at that 4K level, here on the OnePlus 6T, you can shoot at 60 frames per second. And you get some other bonus modes as well, such as the likes of time-lapse and slow motion, if that's your bag. As for the front-facing cameras, both very good at the selfies. You get a 16 megapixel f2.0 here on the OnePlus 6T, and it's a 24 megapixel lens with f2.0 aperture as well here on the Huawei Mate 20 Pro. You can shoot a form of portrait shot as well using both of these handsets. There are just single lens snappers, of course you don't get that double lens for the really accurate depth of field, but it does use a good bit of software smarts in both cases and generally works fine. And you get a screen flash option to shoot a nice nightclub selfie as well, but it's fully automatic here on the Mate 20 Pro, so it won't actually work if I try it now. And that right there in a nutshell is the OnePlus 6T versus the Huawei Mate 20 Pro. As you can see, two very slick devices, very strong contenders for best phone of 2018. Which one do you prefer? Definitely let us know in the comments down below. It'd be very interesting to hear your thoughts. Personally, I'm kind of torn, to be honest. I do really like the Mate 20 Pro. I'm going to spend a bit more time with the OnePlus 6T using it as my full-time handset ahead of my in-depth review. Certainly enjoying it so far. So thanks for watching everyone. Definitely, as I say, fire out your comments down below, and don't forget to hit subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest mobile tech. Cheers!